Hello, I'm back. This is the second lore video because the first one was not a lore video, it was just an explanation. This is going to be me covering the Ultor Corporation, the big bad guys of pretty much all of the Red Faction series, though indirectly for most of them. They're the main bad guys for the original game, Red Faction. I like the Ultor Corporation. I think their aesthetic is very nice. I especially like what they become, which they end up becoming the Marauders, which is an ironic twist on the once formidable and sophisticated Ultor Corporation. All right, I'll draw from the wiki real quick to give a good and detailed overview, and then I'll talk about the transition into the Marauders, and then I'll talk about the Marauders because they are integral to what Ultor would become. The Ultor Corporation is named after the ancient temple devoted to the Roman god Mars and is the body in complete control of Mars prior to the first Martian Revolution, when they were overthrown by the first Red Faction and the EDF. Ultor has had interests in nanotechnology, weapons manufacturing, and, of course, mining. Their logo, in fact, is a stylized, continuous mining machine blade wheel, similar to the ones on Earth, the giant ones with the buckets that dig into the sides of mountains and whatnot. That's what their logo is. Ultor was run by less than amicable people. Their final ruler and most notable individual was a man by the name of Axel Capek, an insidious scientist who enslaved the workforce and did horrible experiments on a lot of people. Let's get into the history, though, as the Ultor Corporation was the first actual presence to colonize Mars. They went 2050, like I said before, to take advantage of the untapped mining potential and take advantages of its remote location. They ship it all back to Earth centrally. they ship they ship it all back to resource stripped Earth, centrally a substance known as nochite, which in Earth's economy could make fortunes. The corporation sees everything in terms of profits and ignores the increasingly hostile relations between miners and security forces, with the technicians carefully filtering all message traffic between Mars and Earth to keep it unaware of the situation. They had complete control over everyone's lives and were pumping out great profit, but were making everyone's life miserable and covering it all up just to make sure that Earth wouldn't get any ideas. During this early period, a man called Capek began to rise in the ranks. He rose to head of research and began using this newfound political power within the corporation to perform a massive amount of unethical experiments. He created the field of nanotechnology and would go to develop a virus that he would spread among the miners just to see what would happen. He was a monster. He would take people away from their bunks and abuse and use them for his own means. This could be anything from simply wanting to peel the skin off of somebody's bones to getting them infected with some kind of awful concoction that he's brewed in his laboratory. He was a monster, and he performed a coup d'etat on the old administrator that was trying to hinder him, and you installed a puppet. So Capek was in control of the entire facility by the time of the rise of the first Red Faction. Apparently, Ultor actually found alien life on Mars, though they didn't know it was alien life. They found these, they thought they had found human mutants down below in the underground beneath one of the Ultor facilities. It was an interesting moment for the corporation, and Axel Capek took extreme pleasure in taking these aliens and crossbreeding them with miners and making life pretty miserable for them too. During the first Martian Revolution, a lot of these monsters came out and began immediately causing havoc, which probably delighted Capek. During the actual first Martian Revolution was what would see the downfall of the Ultor Corporation. The Ultor security forces and a mercenary group led by Colonel Masco began to attack the miners after they rose up in protest to try and overthrow Ultor. The leader, Eos, as we discussed previously, being the person who has Eos named after them, was first trying to fight for a cure because they were infected with the plague that Capek let loose on the miners. After finding the plague, her and Parker, another hero of the first Red Faction uprising, managed to convince Colonel Masco and the mercenaries that Capek was relying on to give in and turn on Ultor, managing to contact the EDF and bring Capek down. The hammer blow that was delivered to Ultor was absolute. It was one of the most successful military campaigns in Earth history, with both the mercenaries, the miners, and the EDF working in conjunction to completely dismantle their hierarchy. Ultor would later pop up on Earth during what is known as the Commonwealth Civil War, which is the plot of Red Faction 2, which takes place on Earth. They were basically supplying both sides and generally being bastards. This ended, of course, when they were completely annihilated during the first Martian Revolution. After Ultor's fall, Capek's personal cadre of scientists fled from the victors and basically went into the caves of Mars. They stole just about everything they could and hid away into the depths of Mars. I like Ultor. Ultor is an interesting company because, it's cruelly intelligent. It goes to Mars to mine resources, send it back to Earth, and basically say, you can't touch me because I'm the only person on Mars that's giving you the resources you need. I am fairly certain Earth knew there were wrong things happening, but they couldn't give a good justification to the company that had pretty much had them on a stranglehold. They could not go and justify military action against the people who were giving them resources on time. Sure, they were making profit from it, but Earth could not afford to try and help Mars in its current state. There was a civil war going on between some of the nations on the planet, and the entire globe was extremely unstable due to, the massive resource mining. So I'm fairly certain that Earth had basically turned a blind eye. And when the first Red Faction managed to contact them, they finally got their green light to go and kick in the door, seizing most of Ultor's monetary and material assets and killing most of those who resisted. It was a brutal and seamless transition from one tyrant to another. The remnants of Ultor would become known as the Marauders. Now, I also really like the Marauders. They are a perfect twist on watching this sophisticated and intelligent group of scientists and corporate overlords devolve into these savage, bloody monsters that would kill anyone who wasn't them. It was extremely brutal, and they were just about as bad as it gets. I'll read from the Marauder wiki now. The Marauders were a reclusive and bloody tribalists who were made up of the displaced scientists of the Ultor Corporation. They were hostile both to EDF and the Red Faction, who they believed were invaders. The Marauders developed this cult of the Martian almost, where they believed that they were the true inheritors of the Red Planet, and that anyone else was destined to die and burn. After the fall of the Ultor Corporation and the first Red Faction uprising, the remaining scientists and technicians flee to the mines and facilities that take up the remaining Ultor holdings on the planet, and then they take the pretense of the Marauders in the beginning to protect their resource and technology and themselves from the Earth Defense Force. These early Marauders were not yet the tribal group that people would come to know and fear. At first, they were just trying to put on a facade to get people to go away so they could continue their work. Though without funding from Ultor, their work quickly began to stagnate. The Marauders were able to construct new homes and facilities inside the Marianas Canyon, able to create this sort of utopia, their Eden, you know? Even if it was built upon rust and grok. They weren't, and they did not have the resources that Ultor did, and were just generally pretty awful. Over time, the new generations of Marauders that were born lost what it meant to be a Marauder in the beginning. Instead of pretending to be this tribal group to protect their interests, they soon began to embody the ravenous and monstrous ideals that Ultor had put up as a facade for the longest time. They were brutal, they were cutthroat, and they hated everyone. They started labeling any other person that was not a Marauder as an Outlander, and they hated the Outlanders. They despised the Outlanders. The Marauders are probably the closest to genuine antagonists that people could have got, and they ironically did more damage to themselves in the long run, as the EDF and the Martian colonists both had a common enemy to fight. The Marauders were a very serious threat, able to scrounge up scrap weapons and vehicles that raided convoys and attacked innocent settlements. They pushed both the miners and the EDF closer than the simple liberation could have ever done. That's enough about the Marauders' backstory, because a lot of it's tied with the story of the Red Faction Guerrilla game, and I don't want to get into that just yet, because bit of a spoiler. Some spoilers, and I want to talk about the story in another video. I adore the Marauders too. They are the transformation of the extremely cool Ultor Corporation and its science and technology and stuff, turning into this miserable collection of aggressive and violent and angry group of savage tribals. Now, they still had fantastic technology at their behold. Ultor was the pinnacle of scientific advancement, and thus the Marauders had all kinds of insane weaponry. they would carry these massive melee weapons called gutters and improvised flechette shotguns, a rifle that fired spikes of metal out to impale just about anything on it. They carried these massive swords and harpoon turrets that fired off metal spikes propelled by magnets. They even had remote charges and singularity bombs that they had kept all with them and around them. Hell, they were some of the first to pioneer the sledgehammer melee weapon, even using a pickaxe at time. They took Ultor's symbology and turned it into ritual worship. The symbol of the digging eternal wheel, the eternal mining wheel, became plastered on their equipment and on their burial sites as this idea of reverence that they would one day take the red planet for themselves. And I find it so cool. If I am gonna do what I want to do, I might include a picture of what the Marauders became, though I wouldn't count on it. Pictures in the software I'm using is a pain already. Though you will know that they look pretty badass. Genuinely, go look it up for yourself. They are cool. That was Ultor and the Marauders. I think that the next video I'll actually go into the Red faction itself, both the one found in the first one and the second one, so we can get a good idea of who the quote-unquote good guys are, you know? My final thoughts on the Marauders and Ultor is nothing really. I have no problems with what Ultor became lore-wise. I think their transition is very nice. I genuinely enjoy and find no issue with them becoming a group of semi-technologically advanced tribal barbarian race purists. They're very cool. All right. I think that's it.